Hello everyone and welcome to my review of Pokémon Rumble Blast. Following on from the first game in the Pokémon Rumble mini-series, Pokémon Rumble Blast, or Super Pokémon Rumble in Europe, Australia and New Zealand, was the first Pokémon branded video game for the 3DS, being released around the world in late 2011. It carries over a large majority of the features of the original game, with its unique arcade-like gameplay style, but with a few welcome additions and some less welcome removals. Onto gameplay first. If you've never played any of the Rumble games beforehand, the basics are you control an in-game toy Pokémon and fight your way through different levels, befriending Pokémon as you go and adding them to your team. Pokémon Rumble Blast was the first game I played and completed on the 3DS system, and I've just recently done so again, all thanks to its intriguingly addictive playstyle. For some reason I find it quite engaging, running through levels, defeating Pokémon as I go, befriending new ones, and I feel a sense of achievement each time I complete an area. However, the levels can get a bit repetitive, especially when having to play the same one over and over, something you'll have to do if you are a completionist, but I'll move on to that later. If you're lucky, you can even run straight through a level, with no need to battle any opponents whatsoever, apart from the end boss of course, and this takes out what little challenge and difficulty there was in the first place. Plot-wise, there is a weak storyline, but nothing that is really heavily built on or necessary to enjoy the game. I actually think this improves the overall enjoyability of the game, as a heavy plot focus would have detracted from a simple, fun gameplay. There is a co-op mode, where you can battle alongside a friend to make it through levels together. Unfortunately, unlike the original game, you can only play 2-player co-op instead of 4, and requires each person to have a 3DS, but regardless, it's still a very enjoyable addition to the game. There are several different modes of battle contained in Rumble Blast. Aside from the basic level battling, there are boss battles at the end of most levels, team battles, charge battles, and the infamous Battle Royale stages. Starting off with boss battles, they feature one giant toy Pokémon and many normal sized Pokémon, usually a pre-evolution of the boss, which regenerate throughout the battle. One wins by defeating the boss, which has very obvious and repetitive attack styles, and the X is the level then appears. I find these boss battles a satisfying end to the stage, due to having somewhat of a challenge avoiding attacks from all surrounding Pokémon, while still focusing your efforts on defeating the boss alone. In team battles, you choose 3 of your team to fight, of which you control 1, and the others are controlled by the game. However, this emulation is hardly intelligent, and usually ends up with your Pokémon teammates being quickly wiped out by opposing Pokémon and mini-bosses, and having to revive them constantly. It doesn't help that you can't rotate between the 3 during the fight, which itself would have made these battles less irritating. However, I do enjoy using the Hyper Mode when enough wind-up energy, which is dropped by defeated Pokémon, has been collected, which revives all your teammates and allows you to combine attacks for a short while regaining health points. Now looking at charge battles, well, I wouldn't really class them as a battle, more of a measure of how many strong Pokémon you have acquired. The game automatically selects your strongest befriended Pokémon and then instructs you to repeatedly press the A button, or alternatively rotate the circle pad, to build up your power and smash through walls of enemies. As you can tell, this is hardly enjoyable, but still a nice touch, as it makes for nice cutscenes and visual artifacts. Finally, Battle Royale stages are much like the equivalent of gym leader battles from the main series games, where you are placed in an arena with high-leveled opponents and have to defeat them all within the time limit to win. These sections of the games, at least the ones unlocked after finishing the storyline, are actually fairly challenging, most requiring you to go back to the previous areas to recruit stronger Pokémon to your team. Touching now on the controls of the game, they are very basic, with the circle pad, or the D-pad if you like the classic controls, being used for moving your Pokémon around the world, and the A and B buttons using your Pokémon's attacks, although some Pokémon only have one move available to them. X opens the in-level menu, where you can scroll through your Pokémon and switch between them, and also view extra stats about them, like their moves' effects and strengths and weaknesses when you press the Y button. The L button is not used at all, and R is only used to register your favourite Pokémon to access them more easily in the switch menu. A helpful feature, but I can't help thinking more could have been done with these buttons, maybe along the lines of dodging left or right during battles. As expected, Start opens up the menu, but Select does not have its own function, simply opening the menu also. Turning our attention to the touchscreen, we can see that it is hardly ever utilised for, well, touching, and at most times displays the current area map. However, I'm not too bothered about this, since I think that if it did have to be used for selection of Pokemon or even some form of combat, it would make handling and playing the game that much more uncomfortable, if you had to keep moving your hands to use the stylus on the lower screen, rather than simply focusing on the buttons and circle pad to play. Overall, the controls are simple and easy to pick up, but I feel that if the L and R buttons had been incorporated as well, maybe as combo linkers, it could have made the constant mashing of the A button less consistent and more tolerable. Being the first Pokemon game on the 3DS, the graphics are quite remarkable, at least compared to previous games in the series on the DS. But to other systems and series, they are fairly basic. The 3D aspect is quite nifty however, and I do quite like the use of it, as it adds some reasonable depth in the environments, which themselves are well designed. I am also impressed by how the Pokemon almost seem to jump out of the screen when picked up or sent in, and adds a nice touch while playing through levels. However, like all 3DS games, the 3D is not needed to play, and the game looks just as nice in 2D, if a bit flatter, but it does allow you to hold your 3DS in a greater amount of positions than when playing in 3D, due to there being no need to accommodate for the 3D alignment. The design of the Pokemon is also drastically different to that seen in generic Pokemon games, implementing a more polygonal-like style to the models, to reflect the fact they are actually toys. I really like this style, as it offers a nice change to the one we all know and love, even if they can be, at times, a bit squashed detail-wise. Regardless, you can still make out which Pokemon is which when switching or attacking Pokemon. The music tracks used in the game very much reflect the gameplay style, light-hearted and action-packed, but also serious and at times do add a bit of good ambience. When battling in a stage, the music goes well with the action on screen, and the quieter periods in between fights help to calm the atmosphere down and prepare you for your next challenge. The sound effects are, at first, pleasing to listen to, with what I would describe as toy-like sounds playing whenever you hit, knock out or pick up a Pokemon, be it a high-pitched strike or a little jingle that sounds like you've literally just picked up a small object. However, over time, these can get slightly irritating, especially when in the middle of intense fights, where the A button is being harassed by your thumb and your ears bullied by a pair of cymbals. Nevertheless, the audio used is a good complement to the gameplay. Now onto the replayability and after-game factors. As I have already mentioned, after completing the storyline, new areas are unlocked in which you can participate into challenging special battles, in many of which you fight against legendary Pokemon. Again, as I've said, these tend to require you to return to previous areas and encounter new Pokemon to recruit and power up your team. Which also leads me on to another challenge for the aftergame, which is, as you may be able to guess, to catch them all. All the Pokemon from the first 5 generations are available for befriending in Rumble Blast, excluding Keldeo, Meloetta and Genesect, due to their not being revealed upon release. As a nice helpful feature, a list of Pokemon available is shown at the entrance to each level, allowing you to see if you have obtained all that you can there. This is where the game can get a bit stale, as some Pokemon only appear very rarely, and some stages must be replayed over and over for one to even appear, let alone be befriended. And did I mention that to get most of the legendaries, you have to play for a stage and hope that instead of being taken to the normal boss stage, you are taken to the special boss stage, where a legendary Pokemon will reside. This only happens every handful of stages, and even then the legendary may not be befriended. Although this does add some sense of grinding to the aftergame, playing through until you obtain that legendary you've wanted for a while, it can get quite tedious, especially if playing through the same stage over and over, hammering away at that A button. I would have been okay with this, if one of the coolest features from the original game hadn't been removed, and that was shiny Pokemon. See, I would have been completely happy playing through stages over and over, and if there was a chance that I could obtain a special version of a Pokemon to use in future battles. But the feature was taken out, which is a shame. On the subject of replaying the entire game and story, it is very plausible, especially if you haven't played it for a while, as I hadn't until recently. However, due to the lack of multiple save files, you have to get rid of all your hard-earned pals and legendaries, if you'd bother to catch them all in the first place, and also your Street Pass data, if you want to play the game through again. Now onto the scoring. Starting with the gameplay, I gave it an 8 out of 10, as it is very engaging and enjoyable, but just let down by the slight repetitiveness after playing it for a while. For the controls, I gave them a 6 out of 10, due to lack of imagination put into using all the buttons to their full potential. Regardless of this point, they are simple to get used to and fit the pace of the game well. Visuals in 3D gets a 9 out of 10, as the areas look stunning for a Pokemon game, and the 3D is used as best it can be. Audio receives a 9 out of 10 also, thanks to the cheery tunes for the most part, and inventive sound effects. Finally, I gave replayability and aftergame a 7 out of 10, as there are plenty of extra challenges to complete, but not enough variety in the gameplay to warrant sitting around for hours beating the same area time and time again. Overall, Pokémon Rumble Blast receives 39 out of 50, or 78%, with its quirky playstyle and brilliant graphics, but is let down by the controls and need to repeat tasks over and over. And now onto my recommendation. I think that all fans of Pokemon should at least give this game a chance. Go and pick it up in their nearest store and give it a play, if only to see their favourite Pokemon in toy form. And so ends my review of Pokemon Rumble Blast. Now I want to know what you guys think. Have you played this game? Did you enjoy it? Would you recommend it to others? Leave all your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for watching. Goodbye everybody.